As you may know already, unallocated job costs are just costs you've incurred that is not recorded to specific projects. You may have labor, you may have materials, you may have salaries or fuel or travel expenses you didn't record to a specific project. What happens with that typically is your trial balance accounts sum up to a higher amount than your job subledgers. So what we have here is a trial balance on the left-hand side, standard trial balance, simplified, and we have a job subledger over here to the right. Remember, one of the first steps you do in building contract schedules is reconciling the activity to the trial balance. So that's what we're going to do. Our job subledger says we've got 2.3 million in revenue or billings. We look at the trial balance, construction revenues, it's 2.3 million. Let's ignore WIP for this example right now to simplify it. Our costs, 1.787 according to the job subledger. When we go to the trial balance, the job costs in this 5,000 series is 1.942 million. That is obviously higher than 1.787. We've got $155,000. Does that a difference? Now, does that mean we did something wrong? Not really. That just means we have some costs we've recorded that we didn't put to specific jobs. Now, if it's something that was a big ticket item and we can easily identify which project it should go to, then yeah, I would say we did something wrong. But it's very common to see this across contractors. There are always some costs and even billings that just don't tie back to the trial balance. You'll typically have more activity in your trial balance than you do on the subledger because you didn't either create projects for small jobs or you have unallocated job costs. It may not be worth your time and effort to assign it to specific jobs because you'll have to come up with some fancy formula to do so. So again, we have a difference in job costs on our trial balance than we do the subledger, which is fine. You just have to identify what that difference is when you go into building the contract schedules, because it helps you determine how you're going to present that information. As you may recall in previous videos, I've presented one method for presenting contract activities, and that method involved reconciling to the income statement. So you have a summary of activity from the open job schedule and closed job schedule that will tie back to the income statement when it comes to revenues and costs. So when you're dealing with unallocated job costs, as you can imagine, they're not included in the current year costs on open jobs or completed jobs. So one way to do that, if you want to tie back to your income statement, is to create a separate line under this summary, title it unallocated costs, and just type in that amount, 155,000. So the user knows that all of these costs were recorded to specific projects and you had $155,000 that wasn't. That's fine for small dollar amounts. If this, in our example, using the amounts we're using, if this was more like $700,000, I would be a little concerned of, why do we have so many unallocated costs? Do we have some costs that should have been recorded to specific projects, or is this just fuel that is hard to track? What is the cause of those unallocated costs? And hopefully it's just, there's no glaring issue and we've got everything squared away. It's just a matter of presentation. So this is one method, is to add a separate line and for unallocated costs and put that amount. Another method is to go to your completed contract schedule and add another line, just as you would with the projects, title it unallocated costs and record keep putting 150,000. It's 155,000. Put that amount as the cost, and that will flow through back to your summary. You see, imagine this is gone, which it is. It's zero. We just increased the cost on the completed job schedule, but we've notified the user that $155,000 in costs is unallocated. You do have another option if you're in the category of having significant unallocated costs and having a good reason for it. So if you do have unallocated costs that just apply to multiple jobs, whether it's field salaries, fuel, you just use a credit card for the fuel, for example, and you don't bother assigning it to specific projects, you'll have high unallocated costs. If you know that they should be assigned to specific jobs, it's worth taking the steps to do that. You don't want to mislead the users in what the actual costs are on a project. But as mentioned earlier, you may have some salaries. Depreciation is obviously one. You may have some fuel that just applies to multiple jobs and you haven't assigned them to those jobs. So you do have another method for presentation. This method is almost identical to the previous method. You use the same inputs, all of the same inputs. All of this information is coming from the subledgers. We're dealing with the same subledgers. We're dealing with the same trial balance. Same information, just different presentation. So in the end, we're going to have the correct revenues on the income statement. We're going to have the correct costs associated with those revenues. It's just the way we present it is going to look different. So with the standard WIP schedule, you'll have columns for revenues earned. That means current year revenues earned and current year costs. Well, since we don't want to show those unallocated costs or any activity that's not specific to projects, we're just going to get rid of them. We're going to get rid of those two columns. So this current year WIP unallocated, you see, that's it. We got rid of the current year revenues earned and costs to date. We still have the same revenues. We still have the same costs. It's just how we present the information. We're using the same inputs, same cost to date, same bill to date, same contract amount, same total estimated costs. All of this is accurate information. We just cut off that additional step that presentation-wise would tie back to the income statement. The same with the completed jobs. All of this is accurate information we obtained through the subledgers. It's just how we present it. The closed job schedule, when you have unallocated costs, just shows contract price and total estimated costs. There's no current year. We don't know how much of this was recognized in the current year, how much of it was recognized in the prior year, because we don't want to show that unallocated amount. Again, that's not saying we're doing something wrong, we're trying to cover up something. It's just not worth the time and effort to assign those costs. Because if you do change the costs and you do start allocating, well, guess what? You're going to have to bump up the estimated costs. If you have direct costs or specific costs assigned to these estimated costs and you're going in and adding additional costs, everything, not everything else, but other amounts have to change. So we just want to avoid spending too much time allocating these unallocated costs. And the way we do it is just not showing current year activity. I'm going to emphasize this again. We're using the correct inputs. Nothing changes. We've got the correct revenues, we've got the correct costs, we've got the correct billings and costs that are going to the contract schedules. we are just cutting off what the current year portion is and prior year. Same under over billings, same cost to complete, same information. It's just presented differently. So you can see here we have no idea if how much the unallocated costs are. There's no line here for unallocated costs. There's obviously no line here. We don't even have a summary because there would be no point in the summary. It doesn't tie back to anything. So those are the two main methods for job schedule presentations. A lot of information there. I advise you to look at your own trial balance and your own reconciliations and see which bucket you fall in. If you don't have a lot of unallocated costs, you can probably do the one that reconciles back. There's no right or wrong. Again, if you have those direct job costs already recorded to projects and you've got minimal unallocated costs. If you do have a lot of unallocated costs, this is the better route. Less headache, less formulas and calculations to assign additional costs. This is a simpler way. I recommend going this route. As always, consult someone else too. Pick somebody else's brain. This is just my idea here of what I would do if I was in that position. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, leave a comment. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next lesson.